Mystara is unique of all the major settings because so much of it is left undefined, or worse, defined multiple times. So much that the fan base has written large portions of it, and the players adopted most of those creations in later editions. This became the official fanon, something uncommon in places like Greyhawk, Dragonlance, and the Realms. Bruce Hurd gave us the expanded nations of Alphatia. Marco Del Monte wrote the definitive guide to the Immortals. The Etrugan revision has replaced the official version for more than a few people. That brings us to today's topic, Minaea, a nation on the southwestern border of Scothar that first appeared on a map in the Master Set. Then it was never mentioned again outside of a single character from the Princess Ark saga. While officially this land has zero written about it, it did get the attention on the vaults, specifically from Francesco de Ferrari of Threshold magazine fame, who gave us our only in-depth look at it from what I could find. Welcome to Mystara. I'm Mr. Welch, and today we are descending into the vaults. Minaea, as I stated, only appears on a single map with no explanation. We don't know the government, its people, its cultures, or even its geography. Worse, the political map presented to us was retconned out of existence in Haldamar's famous speech on how everything in that map was wrong. There is no Empire of the Great Khan, no Dorfin IV, and Thonia had been dead for centuries. Minaea did get several references in other works, if only briefly, and there was nothing about the nation in great detail. They had pirates that attacked Alphatia. That was it. A member of Haldamar's crew was a former Minaean pirate. This raises many questions because a nation that pesters Alphatia should get stepped on hard eventually. Thyatis keeps them at bay with a strong military. Minaea doesn't even come close to the size of Thyatis and is supposed to be south of a massive empire. The intrigue ensued. 6 years ago, Francesco tried to answer these questions with his version of Minaea, which is in reality the only version of Minaea. Much of his work ended up in Threshold magazine number 20, and a lot of that ended up in the Vaults of Pandius, which serves as the greatest repository of Mystaran information in the history of the known universe. He wrote the history, designed the map, created the population and the government. While he was hampered by nothing else being written for the lands surrounding Minaea, he turned the nation into a Confederation of City-States, similar to Minaea, but far more unified. Minaea became a nation where people with nowhere else to go have a home. However, they might not get along with the people already there. The origins of Minaea started 2 centuries ago after the Great Reign of Fire, when Genite settlers founded the city of Tesla, or at least until the Great AC/DC Schism years later, until the followers of Bon and the followers of Brian agreed that both were excellent in their own way and would be held in equal esteem. Tesla proceeds to become the oldest city in Mystara after that. The Teslan culture expanded into several other cities, starting trade with the small Minotaur city-state of Erech. More settlers from surrounding lands would take up the areas around the Teslan city-states, creating the Terrestian culture. In time, this becomes the dominant culture of the region. These city-states would be the most stable in the area amid a sea of chaos and war. Over the next few centuries, the various city-states fought, allied, and traded with each other in a loose confederation. In 100 BC, the last survivors of the Millennian Empire arrive in a ragtag fleet and settled in what would become the city of Minaea. There were too many Millennians for the Terrestians to drive off, but not enough of them that they could force their culture onto the Terrestians. Over the next few centuries, the cultures began to merge into the Minaean. 900 years later, this nation is possibly the most stable in western Scothar. The Millennians founded the city of Minaea, but were content to settle just in the nearby areas. Over the next 3 centuries, they traded peacefully with the Terrestian cities, and intermarriage became an essential part of their culture to secure alliances, trade deals, and it became a popular trend for a while. Eventually, the 2 cultures merged into the current one today. Eventually, the Confederation added cities run by Minotaurs, as well as others populated by members of the Tangor and modern-day Genite people. In 738 AC, the nation of Minaea was formed in its current state, with 13 additional city-states and nations formally added. The Minaean people are diverse, befitting a country that consists of 16 different city-states founded by 5 different cultures. The Teslan culture focused on religions and constructing infrastructure to differentiate themselves from their old nomadic ancestors. Remnants of that ancient culture are still found today. Later, settlers from the Genite lands brought knowledge of warfare and an expansionistic attitude. The Terrestians focused their culture on the seas, becoming fishermen and pirates. The latter were so successful that it became what Minaea was famous for. The Millennians brought advanced knowledges in the code of laws to the nation that would be adopted across the land. The Minotaurs of Minoa brought a formidable fighting force, and though they have tempered their famous rage enough to live next to humans, they are still something to be reckoned with on the battlefield. Minaean cities are some of the most beautiful in all of Mystara. It is part of their cultural identity that where they live must reflect their inner beauty. Buildings are almost all made of stone, frequently marble in areas that can afford it. Temples, art galleries, and parks are common in every town, and slaves keep the streets clean. The cities are in a state of unofficial competition regarding appearance. older areas are constantly renovated, buildings in disrepair are torn down and replaced, and cities sprawl out with new neighborhoods rather than appear crowded. This has caused many of the various towns to become labyrinthine in design as cities are expanded with little regard for central planning. The Minaeans themselves are educated, even the Minotaurs. Public schooling is mandatory for citizens, and even slaves are taught basic literacy and mathematics. The core belief of the Minaeans is whatever you do, do it well. National pride is hammered into students, and competition is encouraged early on. The flip side is that using an unfair advantage or cheating is anathema to Minaeans. If you can't do something, there is no shame in letting someone else handle it. You can train or educate yourself later, then try the task again. This makes the Minaeans appear to be arrogant show-offs to other cultures, which amuses them. A critical aspect of the nation is its diversity. Despite the country being comprised of 5 different ethnicities and races, you aren't going to find them all shoulder to shoulder in most cities. But a Minotaur walking down the streets of Tesla isn't going to draw anything more than a curious glance. The Tangor people are found primarily in the cities of Batu Fomba and Serenia. The Minotaurs are the majority of the citizens in Erech and Sinbay. Gienites occupy the fortress city of Dul. Descendants of the Millennian and Terrastian people comprise the rest of the city-states, and there is a dwarven domain in Dane Karak. That settlement is officially not part of the Confederation, but is considered an allied kingdom, one that has a symbiotic relation with Minaea and even has representation with the king's advisors. The government of Minaea is that of the Confederation. Each of the 15 cities is an officially allied kingdom that passes its own laws, mints its own coins, and elects its own rulers. A king rules over the national territories and collects taxes from the cities, which are only used to improve the national territories. Minaea is blessed with a large amount of natural resources, including minerals, rolling forests, and a healthy bounty from the sea. To prevent the city-states from grabbing up all available land, any town that has a population of over 15,000 is considered a new city-state. Any nation that does not reach this population threshold is considered part of the national territories. While every kingdom can mint its own coinage, in reality they all use the same silver, copper, and gold coins to ensure a stable economy. Disputes between kingdoms are to be handled by the king, but often these flare up into conflicts before news of them reach the capital, and burn out before any decisions can be made. This has caused old rivalries to linger for years without resolution. Minaea is in a difficult position politically. The city-states of Akimu and Irie are famous for their pirates and will attack anyone, even other Minaean nations. They have ravaged the island of Belisaria in Alphatia and coastal towns, especially the Slavers' coast down the Tangor Peninsula. To the north, the nation is threatened by the remnants of the Gienite tribes and a large number of humanoids. In centuries past, they've had to deal with a massive hive-brood infestation that required a temporary alliance of all the regional powers to stop. That was probably the last time this area knew actual peace. The one thing that keeps the Minaeans free is their focus on excellence. The Minaean soldiers kept the fighting prowess of their Millennian ancestors. Their hoplites can hold off advancing armies until a crack in the enemy formation appears. And then it's stompy Minotaur time. Alphatia, while despising the pirates, has become dependent on the merchant states, especially the city of Leontian. The magical empire values the Minaean trade so much that they prevent the Thaetian and Minrithad ships from approaching. Not that stops the more determined Minrithad captains. Minaea occupies a strange position of being insufferable and irreplaceable by its neighbors. The Minotaurs of Minaea are a curiosity compared to the other nations. There are 2 groups of them, the civilized ones that founded cities and live in mostly peaceful harmony with their neighbors, and the savage Minotaurs that rejected their cousins and preferred to raid and pillage like in the old days. These Minotaurs are considered bandits and brigands, much like human highwaymen. Captured savage Minotaurs are offered the choice of servitude or death, with servitude meaning a stint in the military to serve as line breakers and shock troops. The city Minotaurs are not good aligned by any means. They're more neutral and like to be left alone. They have to be reminded that eating sentient creatures, even if they are goblins and orcs, is a bad thing. But they try to behave themselves around humans, even serving as priests of Koranju in other cities. That immortal, the patron of Minotaurs, is a curious case as he's widely worshipped by the militaries of Minaea, despite being an entropic immortal. He's one of the only entropics openly worshipped as part of a state-sponsored religion. Minaean religion tends to vary from city to city, but a few immortals are common everywhere. Terasti is the patron of Minaea, and she is so revered that she has 2 temples devoted to her worship in the capital of Minaea, one on either side of the city so the citizens don't have to walk too far for her services. Other immortals in the Minaean pantheon include Ixion, Cagiar, Coronis, Karatuku, Ninfangle, Ninsen, Paulson, Proteus, Rathanos, Saturnus, Upnashatim, the 12 Watchers, and Valerius. Not all of them are worshipped in every city, but you can find at least a shrine to all of them somewhere. Minaeans are religious, and their temples tend to be works of art in according to their national pride. Minaea also has a large population of sylvan creatures, along with pockets of rare creatures like harpies and cyclopses in the more remote regions. It has possibly the largest population of satyrs in Scothar, if not the entire world. These creatures are considered a nuisance, and while not a threat, will be forced away from civilized areas if their numbers accumulate. Minaeans find them annoying and can't stand their presence. It also has a substantial number of wild Rakasta who are tolerated, far more than the satyrs, by the cities because they prefer to avoid settlements, and when they do have to trade, they pay well. Minaea also has a significant humanoid population, which the military culls when they get too aggressive. That's the nation of Minaea, at least what I could piece together from the information on the vaults. There's literally nothing in the official material describing this nation outside of the word pirate, which is impressive for a culture that only has 2 cities devoted to that. Next week we are looking at the Immortals of the Northern Reaches, the Aesir, to try to explain how Norse gods got inserted into a setting without them. Until then, keep your horns sharp.